Superman. Okay, before you all get up in arms, this point is a very recent revelation, and it's still totally possible that Superman did not cheat on Lois Lane in 2023's Superman Lost number 5 while stranded in space. You probably need some explaining, huh? Okay, so in May 2023, DC released Superman Lost. This story may or may not be canon from what I've read, so take it all with a little tiny grain of salt, but essentially Superman heads on out on a mission with the Justice League, as he does all the time. Only this time when he returns, it is much sooner than expected, and he is very different. He's distant and cold to Lois Lane, and it turns out that instead of being gone just a few hours, he'd actually been gone 20 years, pulled through space to leave him lost trillions of light years from home. The story basically follows him on his mission to get back to Earth, and it is really cool, but a cover for the 5th issue of the story that isn't out yet shows Superman kissing some random Green Lantern lady, and we all have questions. Unfortunately, I don't get to know the answers until July 11th, 2023. The synopsis reads though, Clark Kent, attempting to re-enter his life at the Daily Planet, is haunted by the dire consequences of his attempts to defend his second adopted planet from invasion. There's a lot there, but he's haunted because he totally cheated with Green Lantern. Number 9. Gambit. While almost every fan of the X-Men knows that Remy LeBeau, aka Gambit, and Anna Marie, aka Rogue, are a well-established item, it doesn't mean their relationship is all sunshine and rainbows. And even though Rogue eventually becomes Remy's wife, it turns out she was originally the mistress. Unbeknownst to almost everyone, even her, Gambit actually had a wife, and he was cheating on his wife by being in a relationship with Rogue. So basically, back in the day when little boy Remy was growing up in New Orleans, he made close friends with a woman called Belladonna Boudreaux. Unbeknownst to them both, they both came from rival guilds, the Thieves Guild and the Assassins Guild. As they grew up, the rivalry between these guilds increased, and to attempt to fix that, their fathers arranged for a marriage between the two. Immediately after the wedding happened and the two were married, Belladonna's brother, Julian, lashed out and challenged Remy in a fight to the death. Now Remy won when his mutant powers were activated, and as a punishment, he was exiled from New Orleans. Choosing to make his own choices in life from that point forward, he abandoned Belladonna instead of letting her come with him and moved on to many other ladies, but mainly Rogue. But you bet that came back to bite him in the ass. It really did. Number 8. Invisible Woman. So, the Fantastic Four were one of the first groups of heroes to appear in Marvel Comics. As Marvel's first family, they did their time as heroes and had many run-ins with the early Marvel heroes. One of the first heroes Marvel ever introduced was Namor the Submariner, King of Atlantis. Now, while most fans of the characters may know this already, others might not be aware of the fact that Namor had a huge weird crush on Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman and wife of Reed Richards. Despite the fact that in their first run-in and a few run-ins after, Namor would consistently kidnap Sue and try to convince her to love him, she actually started to develop feelings for the anti-hero. Sue is pretty dedicated to Reed, but Reed has valued his duties and scientific exploits over his relationships with his family in the past, and this has made Sue feel discontent on a few different occasions. And admittedly, Namor worships the ground she walks on, but she never actually made a move until 1976's What If #1, when Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four and Sue was pushed to the wayside. This made her choose to leave with Namor to become Queen of Atlantis and even have his child, although she still eventually goes back. Number 7. Daredevil. Daredevil, like a lot of others on this list, has had many relationships over his time. One of the most real of his relationships, though, came with a woman named Mila Donovan. Meeting after Daredevil had saved her as she was a bystander, she was the one that took the initiative and figured out who Daredevil was, and she pressed her advances on him. She did that while also being a blind woman, which actually gave her a level of understanding with Matt Murdock that few others could equal. The two were together for a while, and they even got married, but as time went on, Mila became more and more worried about her husband, the crime fighter, to the point of seeking a therapist, and eventually, when spurred on by Leela Luca flirting with Matt, Mila accidentally pushed a man to his demise. This got her put into a mental institution. While this was all through the manipulation of some of Daredevil's villains, in Daredevil 1998 #111, Matt cheated on his wife with private investigator slash former model Dakota North. Number 6. Crystal. The incredibly powerful Inhuman known as Crystal is a Marvel fan favorite. She's been around for a hot minute and been in a few superhuman relationships, but the most dramatic and eventful of those relationships, in my opinion, was with Pietro Maximoff, aka Quicksilver. These two broke up loads of times, usually because either Crystal would cheat or Quicksilver would just go off the deep end. Sometimes, understandably, it was both. In Vision and the Scarlet Witch number 10 from 1985, Crystal cheats on Pietro with a real estate agent named Norman, which is revealed when Crystal is murmuring in her sleep about Norman. This causes Pietro to attack Norman, and then he goes so insane he teams up with a gang of sad B-listers and almost takes down the Avengers. Fast forward a little bit after the pair tried and failed a few times to get back together, they were still technically married, though separated, when some slimy private investigator hands Quicksilver pictures of Crystal making nice with Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, who she'd fallen in love with. Around the same time, Crystal was suspicious of Pietro cheating on her with Lorna, who was actually his sister, and then she thought he was gay, which played out in X Factor number 89. There was also a whole thing with the Human Torch and Quicksilver being mind controlled by several different villains, but it doesn't really matter. They finally divorced after the House of M, but man, these two should never have gotten together in the first place. Number 5. Green Arrow. Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, was originally a billionaire playboy, a womanizer, and that quality of the guy came back to haunt him a few times. One of the biggest relationships in Ollie's life was with the Black Canary, and he was actually pretty devoted to his little bird. She even got mad at him for being too possessive sometimes, but he still got in trouble with his little bird on a few occasions for being a little frivolous. The first time we can forgive. Essentially, Ollie was kissed by one of Dina's employees named Marianne, and what most people forget is that the hero was trying to stop that kiss before Dina walked in and saw it. The one I can't really defend came to us in the story arc Straight Shooters. Black Lightning comes to his old friend Ollie for help financing his niece, Joanna, a lawyer, representing a class action lawsuit against a big and corrupt company. As they begin working together, the relationship becomes closer and closer until, in Green Arrow number 28, Ollie goes to visit Joanna to talk about the case, and they end up getting it on. He then gets super regretful and blames Joanna for the whole thing happening, even though it was totally him, and then Jo loses her life. Ollie can't take the guilt anymore, and he breaks up with Black Canary, at least for a little while. Number 4. Cyclops. Cyclops, in terms of his relationships, is kind of the worst. Scott Summers is deeply and madly in love with Jean Grey, there's no doubt about that, both of them being each other's first love. They even have multiple different children, all of whom are key parts in the X-Men mythos. When she eventually passes away, the first time, at the end of the Dark Phoenix saga, Cyclops is in grief. He's so distraught that when a woman comes along named Madeline Pryor, who looks basically like a clone of Jean Grey, because she is, he goes diving in, marrying her and having a child. When Jean returns, he completely abandons his wife and goes back to Jean. Now, with all that dedication to Jean Grey, it's weird how Cyclops consistently has a wandering visor for other women. Like his emotional affair with Psylocke, which didn't really devolve to cheating, but then he had a whole telepathic affair with the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, Emma Frost, which felt much more real. And it arguably was, as when Jean happened to pass away yet again, he was in a relationship with Emma Frost almost suspiciously fast. Number 3. Hawkeye. What is it about archers and infidelity? No, that's not a setup for a joke. Seriously, why are they all cheaters? I don't understand. The Marvel Universe's resident bow-wielding hero, Hawkeye, much like his DC counterpart, is quite the ladies' man. Only with Hawkeye, he hasn't really held down a serious relationship for any length of serious time. Except for in the MCU, where Hawkeye is shown to be the greatest family man you've ever seen. In the comics though, after a few failed committed relationships with fellow Avengers, including when Hawkeye and Spider-Woman were briefly romantically involved until Hawkeye cheated on her with someone he had just met, Hawkeye found himself searching for more casual encounters with women. After saving a civilian named Cherry from the Russian mafia, Hawkeye begins a sort of relationship with her, but not considering it to be an actual relationship, like he does with everyone apparently, Clint continued sleeping around with other people, and Cherry did not like that. Number 2. Colossus. One of the other best mutant romances in Marvel Comics was between Kitty Pryde and Colossus. Despite some of the weird aspects of the relationship, like their age difference, they did go on to become a real good pairing, until Colossus cheated on Kitty Pryde. When Colossus was trapped on Battleworld with the most of the heroes during the Secret Wars event, he met and fell in love with an alien healer known as Zaji. He basically completely forgot about Kitty. When Colossus returned to Earth again, he was kinda different. He and Kitty were dating by this time, but Colossus told her about Zaji and then told Kitty he couldn't date her anymore because he loved that alien, who he would probably never see again. This got him beat up by Juggernaut without help from Wolverine. They eventually did get back together and even almost got married until Kitty literally left him at the altar, which, you know, like, you're weighing your goods and your bads here. But in at number 1, it's Nightwing. This is probably the worst of the bunch, not only because it breaks up a long beloved relationship between Nightwing and his Teen Titans teammate, Starfire, but also because the writers of the comics retcon things about multiple characters' histories that either made no sense or completely ruined the integrity of said characters. After deciding that Oracle / Batgirl / Barbara Gordon is the perfect fit for Nightwing over Starfire, the beginning pages of Nightwing Annual Number 2 in 2007 give us Nightwing confessing how absolutely madly in love he is with Barbara Gordon. The story then goes on to retcon their entire history, stating that they've been in love since the days when they were Batgirl and Robin, despite their weird age difference. And then, if that weren't weird enough, the book turns Dick Grayson into a cheater. Dick shows up the night before he's supposed to marry Starfire and spends the night with Babs. So he cheats on Corey, but then Dick also gives Babs an invitation to the wedding after just spending the night with her. And she wasn't even aware that Dick was still planning on getting married. Damn. That's bad. Coming in at number 10 today is Aquaman. Aquaman and Mera are one of the most well-known comic book couples. Like, those two just go together. It's just how it is. But for a good chunk of time, that was in danger. Thanks to the hands of Black Manta in Adventure Comics number 452 from 1977, their family had been broken apart, and this couple became pretty estranged from one another, with Mera running off to live in a separate dimension and Aquaman being all sad and lonely at home. But while Mera, who totally abandoned Arthur, stays faithful to the relationship, our lonely sad boy Aqua King, he finds some solace in a woman named Dolphin. Now, before I read this comic, or more into the backstory, I always thought people meant that Aquaman dated a literal dolphin, and no, that ain't the case, as far as I know. If you're into that though, I turn you to The Deep from The Boys TV show. But while Arthur is enjoying his time with Dolphin, Mera shows back up in Aquaman number 12 and totally catches these two in the act. A fight breaks out, but I guess this is chill in Atlantis because Mera does forgive the hero and they get back together and Dolphin runs off with Tempest. Yay! Number 9, Human Torch. So how do I explain this? Okay, so when Dr. Doom was looking for a wifey to become Queen of Latveria and to help him rule, he chose Victorious, his most loyal follower and herald. She obviously and gladly said yes, but unbeknownst to Dr. Doom, the night before that happened, Victorious and Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, defended Latveria's treasures together and somehow found themselves getting it on. I'm sure Doom would be a little unhappy, but it's actually Johnny who is the one doing the cheating here. Johnny has a soulmate by the name of Sky who shares a connection with Johnny, and she instantly sensed his cheating with the Symkarian bride-to-be. But then also, Johnny goes to this wedding in Fantastic Four Volume 6 issue number 33 and just causes problems. Meaning, Victorious totally tells Doom about the encounter in the middle of the wedding ceremony. Doom responds how you'd imagine Doom would respond. Number 8, Rex Splode. In the world of Image Comics Invincible, people do some bad things for some pretty interesting reasons, which gives a lot of characters their own unique personalities. Take Rex Splode for example. He is basically able to charge objects to make them explode, kind of like Gambit from the X-Men. But while Gambit was actually pretty cool, and sometimes a jerk, Rex Splode is just a huge jerk all the time. He's rude, sassy, sarcastic, immature, arrogant, and argumentative. He makes crude jokes about his own friends / teammates, but usually gets his butt handed to him when he takes off the wrong person. But at the same time, he is truly a hero, and he does fight tooth and nail for the same friends that he will make fun of. When the story kicks off, this hothead is dating Adam Eve, and he was weirdly possessive of her, which managed to turn on its head when he completely cheated on Adam Eve with another team member, Duplicate, and a few of her duplicates in the shower. In the teen team headquarters of all places too. The worst part about this one is that Eve walked in on the whole thing. This did open up Eve to start seeing Invincible though, so I guess it all turned up roses. Number 7. Betty Ross. For a book that's about a giant green monster that's potentially a vessel for a Lovecraftian monster that preys on the nightmares and rage of mankind, Immortal Hulk has a lot of heartfelt moments. Which is a weird thing to say when this is a list of cheaters. Basically, this is because Betty Ross cheats on Bruce Banner with Bruce Banner. Or technically she cheats with an aspect of Bruce. Betty and Bruce's relationship is complex. They were so good together at first, but obviously the Hulk makes things complicated, and Bruce has a lot of childhood stuff and daddy issues to get through, like a metric butt ton of it. Eventually, Betty passed away, but she came back and became the Red She-Hulk, and then she fused that persona with that of her Harpy persona that she becomes sometimes, so that she was the Red Harpy Hulk thing, or whatever. Essentially, in Immortal Hulk issue 48, while Hulk was Joe Fixit, he and Betty, as the Red Harpy, got it on. She even talked about how closed off Bruce is to her compared with the Joe Fixit persona, and even other personas of the Hulk. Now, I'm glossing over a lot of the details here, so if I misread this, please let me know in the comments what you think of it, because I'm still debating if this counts as cheating or not. Number 6. Atom. The Justice League superhero known as the Atom had a pretty great wife, Jean Loring, but it's a comic book, so of course these good things can't always last. Jean and Ray have been involved before Ray was even a superhero, meaning yes, they were into each other without the whole weird power dynamic thing. But obviously, that changes. Jean fell in love with Ray, but she struggled to get on board with the whole superhero, my life's always in danger and therefore so are you thing, meaning she was constantly put in danger. The relationship struggled, and they both each had their own little entanglements. Her cheating gave us the Sword of the Atom though, which made a lot of people love the character of the Atom, but still, she cheated. But it also involved him going and finding a tiny little micro-civilization in the jungle, and then he had his entanglement with their micro-princess. I guess it kind of makes sense when you can change your size like that, but I don't know. Then, Jean becomes some crazy powerful villain, and it's just a whole whack of not fun. I don't know. Crazy. Number 5. Mystique. Mystique is one of those characters that is actually more deep and complex than some might initially think. Thanks to her powers, she has been around for a much longer amount of time than you might think too. Once upon a time, Mystique was married to a regular dude named Christian Wagner. Now if that last name sounds familiar, you may know where this is going. While still married, Mystique ends up meeting a new, interesting guy from a pretty exotic place. His name is Azazel. He is a demon-looking mutant from the Brimstone dimension. Sounds lovely, honestly. Or that's what Mystique apparently thought, as she cheated on Christian Wagner with Azazel, and even had his baby. A little demonic-looking mutant baby with blue skin who would come to be known as Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler of the X-Men. I think one of the worst parts about Mystique's actions here though is that when Christian suspects what she's done, she totally just takes his life. What's up with that? Number 4. Pepper Potts. Speaking of messed up, unlike her MCU counterpart, Pepper Potts, or Rescue as she is known in superhero form, in the comics actually winds up with Happy Hogan instead of Tony Stark. And she was not as good of a girlfriend as the MCU makes her out to be. Actually, she was not as good of a wife because her and Happy actually got married. Unfortunately, the marriage did not go the happy route anyone wanted though. That's because it ended with the revelation that Pepper Potts was and had been cheating on her husband with an old high school boyfriend of hers. The scandal, my god. The worst part is she tried to back it up by saying that she thought Happy was cheating on her too, but he totally was not. Number 3. Black Canary. Now, I want to preface this point by saying this instance of cheating actually happened in a fill-in issue of Justice League of America, and it was almost instantly forgotten about as if it never even happened. So basically, both Black Canary and Green Arrow were at odds with the world, so the writers felt that they were were perfect to explore feelings for each other. The relationship developed as time went on until they finally became a couple. This was established well before the writer at the time, Denny O'Neil, ended his run at Justice League of America number 83. Robert Kanigher wrote a fill-in issue before Mike Friedrich took over the book with issue number 86, and in his fill-in issue, he decided that Black Canary was actually still open and available for a certain big-time leaguer. The Batman. It's very strange. Basically, Batman bursts into where Black Canary is on vigil in order to take over. Like, he literally busts in there. With nothing to do and apparently no one to go hang out with, she asks if she can hang out with Batman. And he says he'd enjoy her company, which makes her go all, "Oh my god, but you're Bruce Wayne, you have so many girls around you all the time, you'd enjoy my company?" And then he's all like, "Yeah, but the only girl I want got away from me a long time ago." And then he gets super emotional, and then so does she, and Batman gives her a big old bat hug, and quote, "In their loneliness, they are just so randomly drawn to each other, and then they kiss." Immediately, they both are like, "Oh my god, I feel so guilty," and they run off separately, only for Black Canary to later call him a brother and ask for tips on how to handle her relationship with Ollie, and he gets super jealous. It's really weird, and it's just abandoned. But it happened. Number 2, Tim Drake. Everyone in the Bat family has time for romance somehow, and while I knew about Batman and Nightwing's relationships, I had no idea about Tim Drake's. Well, at least I didn't know about his very first girlfriend, Ariana. They were a pretty cute couple, to be honest. He protected her father from the Russian mob, or at least tried to, and he saved her directly from the mob as well. But things got a little complex when Stephanie Brown, aka Spoiler, entered the picture. Clearly, Tim was somewhat smitten with Spoiler, and obviously Ariana picked up on this. Despite Tim telling her that she shouldn't worry about Stephanie, he found himself going out on patrols as Robin a lot more with Stephanie, and they even kissed, although that was more Stephanie than it was Tim. Luckily, before things went too far, Tim ended things with Ariana, but still stayed friends at least for a little bit. And finally, in at number 1, it's Batman. Batman may be a pretty stoic, grumpy detective, but Bruce Wayne is quite the ladies' man, and sometimes those worlds, they clash. Actually, it happens a lot of the time. Of all his lovers, Selina Kyle, Catwoman seems to be the favorite of the people, which is an interesting choice for a man who is pretty justice inclined. What some people may know is that Batman himself has almost always had big eyes for someone that just makes way more sense: Wonder Woman. When Bruce was engaged to Selina during Tom King's run on Super Friends, he ended up getting quite a bit of alone time with Diana. Batman and Wonder Woman found themselves living together in the realm for over 37 years, and they definitely, bonded. While it's not entirely confirmed, Selina was almost entirely certain that Bruce cheated on her, and honestly, I think he did too.
Number 10, Batman and Wonder Woman. Oh Wonder Bat, we meet again. When it comes to pairing up the Trinity, people normally go for the super obvious jock cheerleader style pairing of Superman and Wonder Woman, and there's nothing wrong with the tried and true. But some people want something a little bit more peculiar, and so they go Batman and Wonder Woman. And of course, for people like me, an intellectual, you can always go Superbat. Anyway, this pairing appeared most prominently in the DCEU's Justice League. But in the modern era, Batman at the time of this recording, during the arc when he was engaged to Selina, it happened again. You know that a character being engaged or in a relationship is catnip to writers. They just perk right up and go, what? Taken? Cheating? Where? So this occurred in Batman 39 and 40, so in Batman's own book, and it was an almost cheat. All of a sudden, Wonder Woman is just like, Bruce, he's taken. Time to make my move. Them moving in for a kiss is the cliffhanger of issue 39. And then in 40, Batman is all like, no, I can't, I'm marrying Selina. Ha, no you aren't. DC says no marriages. I just love that this was a will he or won't he cheat cliffhanger. Na 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 na, not a cheater. But he thought about it real hard. However, then we have the Justice League book. Number 9, Batman and Jessica Cruz, one of the Green Lanterns. So internal memos, they matter. Tell people what you're doing. Over in Justice League 38, which now in the timeline they say, oh no, this will all happen before, after, but not at the same time as Catwoman. However, when all of this was coming out, or depending upon how you read it, this was Cheating City. So Batman was the leader of the Justice League. Why? I don't know. Who would vote for that? Anyway, he didn't handle an arc well with a certain baddie called the Fan, who yes, of course, was an obsessed fan and a jab at bad modern comic fans. So a pleasure to read. Who doesn't love seeing themselves mocked or satirized for the actions of a vocal few who have come to be the ambassadors for the whole? I know I don't. Batman was asked to resign by Superman after all of of this, and he does, but Jessica Cruz, who suddenly has feelings for him after spending issues pining after Barry Allen, follows him into the locker room and is all, well, this is about to get complicated, and kisses him, and he just stands there. Hot? Yeah, this is one of those weird overlap things where it's okay in one book but not in another. New 52 vibes. Number 8, Tim Drake and Jubilee. Cheating on spoiler. Woohoo! Love for Tim Drake, by which I mean we're talking about him. He has been very sidelined of late. So Marvel and DC ran a crossover series in the 90s. They've had many crossovers, but this one is one of the better remembered because it would lead into the Amalgam universe. During the fighting portion of this, where characters had to battle to see who was strongest, Tim was paired up against Jubilee. And she was so thirsty. She thought he was the cutest and wasn't shy about it. In fact, it would be part of why she lost the battle. Yes, Jubilee, now classified as some Omega potential, or well, she was pre-House of X, but still with decent abilities, was defeated by Robin. She would share a kiss with him despite him having a girlfriend and him telling her that. And she would actually cross dimensions later on to see him again. He looks so flattered but also horrified. It's an interesting emotional mix and probably accurate. Jubilee needs to calm down. Crossing dimensions and companies. Number 7, Spider-Man and Silk cheating on Anna. Spider-Man has had many love interests, and some have been quite iconic. You know them, Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, the Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, but there are others, and post his time as Superior Spider-Man, one of those was Anna Maria, kinda. She was a great match for him intellectually and an asset in helping him run his company. The rationale behind why she was there was kind of, well, they meant it well, but it's one of those compliments that is a backhand insult, with Slott talking about how all of Peter's love interests had been traditionally beautiful and how that was unrealistic and it was time to change that. So basically tokenizing Anna and reducing her down to one of her traits, her dwarfism. That's gross. Anna deserves better. She also deserved better than to be cheated on. She comes home and those two are on the ceiling. Okay, so the relationship between Peter and Anna is complicated. It was kind of platonic because she was more in love with Otto, who had been in Peter's body before that, but they still live together and share an apartment. On the ceiling. Come on, Peter. This was cause Silk and Peter, their pheromones interact and they actually can't keep their hands off each other, which also gross. Though that's my opinion. Some love it and think that makes them endgame. Share your thoughts down below. Number 6, Scott Summers, Madeline Pryor, and Jean Grey. Get ready. Oh yes, it's time for Scott, cheater extraordinaire, in the arc that started a lot of fans on the path towards hating him. So, Jean Grey died after the whole Phoenix Saga thing, and Scott was devastated, but that changed when he met a woman who looked exactly like Jean, Madeline Pryor, who it turned out looked so much like her because she was her clone, made for him by Mr. Sinister. He would go on to marry her and have a child, Nathaniel, Nate, aka Cable, with her. However, Jean was alive and Scott would leave his family to be with her, not keeping in touch with them and not telling Jean about his new life and kid. What a winner. This arc would make many fans majorly lose sympathy for Cyclops. I mean, the actions are hardly heroic, which is fine, but it also makes sense why people don't want to get behind him either. Number 5, Connor Kent, Wonder Girl, and Tim Drake. So this one can be chalked up to sadness. So Wonder Girl, Cassandra Sandsmark, was dating Superboy, Connor Kent, but he up and died as you do, and she was distraught. So was his best friend Tim Drake, and the two, well, they just needed some comfort, and they were both there, and they both knew him, and while emotions got out of control, things happened. However, Connor wasn't dead, cause who is? I mean, really, yes, be sad, but you should give people a grace period, because I mean, look at how long Clark took before he came back to life. You gotta give people at least 2 months. But after all of this, Cassandra kinda liked him too. But this whole arc died hard. They're all separated, or were, but it happened, so it counts. Number 4, The Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, Namor, and Reed Richards. Now, the 2018 Fantastic Four comic had the audacity to say that Namor and Sue aren't canon. Where were you? This is a thing. At the very least, she is having an emotional affair with him. Namor has been in love with Sue pretty much since he saw her, and they have been the focus of several what-ifs where they end up married. Also, just alternate dimension universe stories where they're also married. But even in Mainverse, the two have shared kisses. He's asked her to be his queen. Even Reed and Sue's son knows that Namor is in love with her. Namor has told Reed to his face that he has been trying to get Sue to leave him. This is when they were both on the Illuminati. Namor and Sue have a long history. She seeks him out when she is sad or neglected, and he has and will go above and beyond for her. They have a deep relationship, and Reed for his part just kinda lets it happen. Sue and Reed have a complex marriage. Sue loves Reed despite everything, but he's also been very distant and neglectful, and she's sought comfort elsewhere, even if at times it's just emotional. Nowadays, Reed is a more attentive husband and father, but Namor is there, waiting. He's always waiting. He's patient. she could be queen of the sea. Even Valeria, her and Reed's daughter, called her mom out for co-signing her father's behavior and went to live with Doom for a bit. Doom is her godfather, and he named her. The more you know. Number 3. Scott Summers, Jean Grey, and Emma Frost. Hello, Scott. We meet again, for the last time, on this list at least. So this happened during Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, when Emma Frost would find herself becoming a teacher at Xavier's school. This was after the genocide on Genosha, which is hard to say. She would enter into a relationship with Scott under the guise of therapy, and while there they would do some role-playing, which would involve her transforming into Jean as the Phoenix. And this got kinky real fast. And Scott, once a cheater always a cheater Summers, was down. So these two would carry on this affair until Jean found out and tortured Emma with her worst memories. And then Jean would just nope out noble sacrifice, so we never really had to deal with any of it. And now we have House of X, where maybe Jean, Scott, and Logan are a throuple. Comic canon is a wonderful, beautiful, changing, magical place. Don't date or marry Scott Summers. This has been a PSA. Number 2. Aquaman, Mera, and Dolphin. This was another sad, grief-driven cheating. So Black Manta killed Arthur and Mera's son, and in a depressing bit of realism, this drives the couple apart, and she actually seemingly leaves him for another dimension and to grieve. And so eventually he's like, okay, I guess it's time to move on, and he takes up with Dolphin. However, then suddenly Mera is all, I'm back, and annoyed that he is even with Dolphin, even though it's been a long time. So the two would eventually reconcile and move on. But this one had some extenuating circumstances. Is it stepping out if your wife is in another dimension and kind of implied that she was never coming back? I don't know. Tell me your thoughts. And number 1. Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, and Starfire. The question of who should be with Dick Grayson has been an ongoing one. Barbara Gordon or Starfire. He has had profound relationships with both. He's asked both to marry him, and at one point cheated on Starfire, who was his fiancée at the time, with Barbara. So what happened? Well, he went to see Barbara to invite her to his wedding, but it was shortly after all of the Killing Joke stuff and she was Oracle, and the two ended up sleeping together and comforting each other, and Barbara thought they were getting back together. But in the morning he gave her the invitation to his wedding. That's right, he hadn't told her. She rightfully threw the invitation in his face. Just wow, Dick, way to live up to your name. Rick would never, because he's not interesting enough.